Hi, I'm Subramanian, and I'm a clinical educator at the University of Iowa. Part of my job is I get to lead a seminars in supervision with second-year master's SLP students, and we talk about supervision. And one of the things that someone mentioned in class this year was that reading articles and discussing supervision sort of opened the curtains to knowing what happens in the processes behind supervision, and we came up with this idea of creating a video where we could sort of give you some information about the processes in supervision and what happens in behind the scenes in supervision and clinical education. So what you'll see is students in the University of Iowa supervision class, graduating class of 2020, who will be talking to you about little aspects of supervision based on their personal experiences with a variety of supervisors and outplacement supervisors, reading articles and class discussions about some things that might benefit you in supervision. So the idea is that this would be most beneficial to students who are in the process of going to be supervised, so getting into grad school or starting clinical education, and so to understand why their supervisors may be doing some things and to be able to make the best out of their clinical education opportunities. There's probably value for supervisors too to watch this video and learn about the processes involved and how they can help students understand the value of this. So let us get started.
It's important at the beginning of a supervisory relationship that you take time to cultivate that relationship with your supervisor, and your supervisor is going to do the same with you, because that relationship that you build is going to be the foundation for all of your growth in clinic and your learning. But that isn't going to happen on its own. It's really important to be mindful and open and vulnerable when building that relationship, so that you can build that trust together with your supervisor. Remember though that your supervisor is going to come to that relationship from a different place than you are. You're coming in as a student who is coming into these new experiences to learn, whereas your supervisor is coming into this relationship to help you grow and foster your clinical skills. And so there might be a little bit of a different dynamic just because you two see that from a different angle.
Mm-hmm. And along that, it is a team relationship, but the expectations from the supervisor and the supervisee are going to be, you have the same end goal, but the expectations might be different. So in the beginning of that relationship, you might be asked what your expectations are for the supervisor and vice versa. So she might ask you for how what type of learning style you like, or the way that you want feedback and timeliness, those kinds of general expectations to help keep the relationship strong. And throughout the course of the supervision, those expectations might change. So you might start at one level as you're gaining clinical experience, and then once you build up your knowledge and your clinical expertise, those expectations might change. So just be mindful that there might be a shift in expectations. They might become greater, and when the supervisor knows that she or he can expect more from you.
You'll likely experience a lot of different supervisory styles throughout your time as a student here and while you're a supervisee in your outplacements or even in your CF positions. So we'll discuss a few of these styles from Anderson's continuum model of supervision. And one of these is a high direct, high indirect style in which supervisors emphasize both direct and indirect behaviors. So this might be a lot of telling and critiquing, but also they might ask a lot of questions and do a lot of listening.
The second style is a high direct, low indirect. This is where the supervisor does a lot of teaching and telling, and they don't do as much asking or listening.
In a low direct, high indirect style, supervisors rarely teach or criticize, but emphasize a lot of asking of questions, listening, and reflecting on your ideas and feelings.
The last supervisory style is a low direct and low indirect style. Supervisors might be more passive in their supervision with this style.
And it's important to note that a direct supervisory style may feel more defense-inducing, with the supervisors giving their opinions, suggesting change, and always evaluating your performance. And it might feel hard to receive direct feedback at first or constructive criticism, but just know that it's all for your benefit.
Your supervisor's style of supervision may change as you grow and learn. At the beginning of your relationship with your supervisor, it may be a more direct style of supervision where your supervisor is telling you and teaching you more about the population that you're working with. As you grow and learn more and become more comfortable with the populations that you're working with, it may become a more indirect style that will help with your critical thinking. In any setting, it's important for the supervisor and the supervisee to demonstrate empathy, respect, genuineness, the ability to be understood, and the capacity for self-disclosure.
Your supervisors will work to help you develop your critical thinking skills, which are not only necessary to assess your client performance and progress, but also are important to help you evaluate what you did to help your client succeed, how you can modify what you're doing to help them even more, and what the next steps are for therapy. Your supervisors may help you do this by asking you 3 broad questions: what, so what, and what now? Additionally, supervisors may start off by asking you simpler content questions, but as you gain more clinical experience, they will increase the cognitive load of these questions.
A common way that supervisors will help you develop the skills to effectively answer their questions to you is through self-reflection, which will help you improve your self-awareness of your own level of independence and clinical competence. Also, knowing why you're doing something helps you develop more independence than just knowing and considering the what and how. The process and skill of critical thinking allows you to begin to understand the why.
You will be evaluated on multiple points throughout your time being supervised. There are 2 main types of evaluation that your supervisor might use: formative and summative assessment. Formative assessment is ongoing feedback that your supervisor will give you throughout the semester, such as during or directly after each session that you give. Summative assessment is a comprehensive evaluation after a period of time to meet with you and go over if you're meeting all of your clinical benchmarks.
In general, feedback based on formative assessment should be presented to you consistently throughout the semester, and it's usually related to specific clinical situations. On the other hand, summative assessments are useful to review, integrate, and analyze on a deeper level the information that you've been learning throughout the ongoing formative evaluation. Understanding that you'll be receiving honest and constructive feedback based on your clinical performance is helpful for you to learn and grow as a clinician.
The purpose of feedback is to correct, reinforce, or suggest changes in performance to promote improvements in a supervisee's future performance. Though it might be a new and scary experience to receive feedback about your performance, without it you might continue conducting therapy or making clinical decisions with a lack of confidence, even if you're doing a good job.
Your supervisor might ask you if you have a preference on how you receive feedback. One of those ways you could receive feedback is immediate feedback, which is provided either right in the moment or directly after your session. This is something that's really helpful for being able to think about changes while it's fresh on your mind right after something happened. Another way is delayed feedback, like written feedback. And this can be given, this can give you time to think about the feedback before you have a discussion with your supervisor. Supervisors might start giving you more delayed feedback when you're later in your clinical education, and this is to help you build your reflective skills and your critical thinking skills.
Many factors can affect the way that feedback is delivered and accepted. Supervisors will be adapting feedback based on previous experiences that they've had with students, and when they deliver it, it might be impacted by the presence of clients or the time that you have to give or get that feedback.
It might be harder to accept feedback that you don't agree with or that feels like negative feedback. It can even feel embarrassing, and just remember that that's a totally normal emotional reaction. But trying new things and doing things in different ways is part of the learning process. And your supervisor is giving you feedback in ways to help you grow as a clinician based on the years of experience they've had. So everything that they tell you is with purpose.
It takes time and practice to get used to the feedback process, both for the supervisor who's giving it and for the supervisees who are receiving it. If you are not getting regular feedback or would prefer a different method of feedback, feel free to bring it up to your supervisor and have a discussion about it so that you can have a better supervisory relationship and process. One of the most important aspects of supervision is creating a respectful learning environment where you and your supervisor are working together.
So this means that giving and receiving feedback can be a discussion. So take time with your supervisor to clarify what your supervisor means, offer your alternative perspectives, and provide reciprocal feedback back to your supervisor in order to make it that respectful learning environment.
Feedback is one of the most important tools for developing your skills as a clinician, and if you consider the points that we've talked about, it can mutually benefit your relationship with your supervisor and with your clients.
In any supervisor-supervisee relationship, conflicts may arise whether they be big or small. It's important to remember that everyone handles conflict differently. There are 5 different types of conflict management styles, which are competing, collaborating, sharing, avoiding, and accommodating. The competing style consists of high concern for oneself and a low concern for the other. The collaborating style promotes a we both win outlook. The sharing style is one of compromises, and the concern is both for oneself and for the other. The avoiding style is one that many of us are prone to, in which conflict is not addressed. The accommodating style involves little concern for oneself while having high concern for the other person. There is not necessarily a right or wrong style of conflict management, and you might change styles depending on the conflict itself and the situation, but it's important to be aware of your own conflict management style as well as the other person's style.
Girardi 2004 identified the following as potential barriers to the process of conflict management: time constraints, fatigue, poor communication, unclear roles, and conflicting policies. Therefore, being familiar with your own conflict management style is important, as knowing how you tend to resolve conflict may help you overcome these barriers, thus leading to a more enriching and successful supervisory process.
So an article by Moore discusses current issues that face diverse supervisor and supervisee relationships. Since supervisors are in a position of power, it is especially important that they be aware of the potential impact of their cultural background on their thoughts and actions. Cultural competence is not necessarily about knowing every culture, but rather an open attitude about one's own bias and prejudice and how it may impact the perceptions of others. Another way to encourage cultural competence is to foster an environment of openness and learning. One strategy to encourage this openness is to encourage a kind education when others or yourself make statements that may be offensive or make assumptions about others' experiences.
All right, we hope that you enjoyed this video and that it was informative for you, and that you learned something about the process of supervision and about how you are going to approach this clinical education phase in your career. If this is the first time you're watching it and it's before you started being supervised, I would recommend watching it again after 2 months of being in a clinical education program, so you can start to understand what you're observing and make sure you're getting the most out of this clinical education opportunities. If you have questions and would like to talk to me, you can reach me at the email below, and I look forward to hearing from you all.